Thank you. Thank you so much. Thank you, guys. Well, as a community of parents here tonight, I suspect that we have a lot of differences. There's a lot of different reasons. You took time to come out here, and I know your time is very valuable. For example, be home tonight building your Tom Brady voodoo dolls to cripple so my Eagles have a chance on Sunday. So I don't know where you guys are on that, so we'll just leave that lie where it is. But in any event, I also know that there are very among us. Am I doing something wrong? I'm going to bring you a new mic. Okay. I'll keep trying this until you get the new one. Okay. I also know there's a very powerful between us as well. There are really three bonds. First, singular mission. And it's important that we talk about the concept of mission because a lot of us kind of screw up the mission by getting caught in the details, the strategies and tactics we think are important. Really, what is our mission as parents? That what we're hoping we do is sorry about this, to raise our kids to be like happy young adults. Isn't that what it's all about? Okay. And it's amazing how with such a wonderful, noble mission in mind, we can screw it up by getting caught in details that have diminishing returns that actually destroy our chances of pulling off that mission. So that's kind of the overview, is talking about why are we here tonight. Now I know our differences, excuse me while we change out the mic.
Sorry, friends.
It's an Irish Catholic thing, but in any event. So, the differences are, I think what dragged you out here are things, worries about your kids, to include anxiety, depression, suicide, drug use, the opioid crisis. So a lot of us have individuated kind of concerns that motivate us. But you'd be surprised about the bonds, the similarities, the first being our mission of raising kids into happy adulthood. And we don't define happy as yippee, yippee, joy, joy. Happy is really about feeling connected to the world, having purpose and passion, having a sense of self. And that is really the magic formula we're trying to go after as we raise kids today. And as you'll see, we've sort of lost the recipe by trying to foster the mission too much, too hard, thinking that we can manipulate things to make it happen as opposed to just tweaking the child that is presented to us by Mother Nature or God or whoever you think put you in this predicament that you're in at the moment. The second bond has to do with expectations, and that we have to be very careful about our expectations. When my son Ross was born, he was brilliant. He actually truly is a genius. And when he was a baby, I did that stupid baby IQ test and so forth, and I was thinking, boy, Rhodes Scholar, this kid's going to be amazing. And then as he got older, I was thinking, well, maybe he could graduate from a nice state school. And then he got older, and we fell back to alive at 25. No criminal record, that's a success sort of a thing. So our expectations can also crash and get caught up in how we interact with the kid, because often we really see our children as extensions of ourselves, our own ego, and we sort of project that into them, as opposed to understanding that our mission is to help them define their own identity, to become who they are, but keep them alive as they go through that process. It's a tricky thing. The next thing that we have in common is that in terms of the drug crises that are out there, the different drugs and those different mental health issues we went over, they all relate to one common enemy that all of us can share in terms of being worried about our kids, and that enemy is stress. Guys, all of those disorders all relate ultimately back to stress. But stress isn't the simple thing we think it is. Stress is a weird irony. Kids who have too much stress, certainly we always worry about those, and you've experienced tragedies with kids pushing themselves too hard. But we've also forgotten about the other end of that bell curve of stress. Kids that have quit, that have too little stress, that are unable to engage with the world at all. And the amazing thing is kids at both ends of the spectrum have almost exactly the same rates of dysfunction. And terrible things happen on both ends of the extreme. The bell curve, the sweet spot, is in the middle. And that's what we have to try to do, is to remember every kid is a different book, and they have to find that sweet spot of challenge. I'm going to lay that out more specifically through tonight when we talk about trying to find those things with kids, because ultimately we're talking about a concept called resilience. And resilience is also something that is widely misunderstood. So what I'm hoping to do tonight is to let you know about those crises that are going on out there, the bad news stuff, and tell you what the research clearly says is our salvation. And that is focusing on the resilience of the child, not the batting average, not the GPA. And it's interesting the factors that go into building resilience. They're often not what we think. Before I get to all that, I need to get some information from you guys in terms of where you are in terms of parenting history, how many scars you have. Could I get a show of hands? How many here have their eldest child age 25 or over? Okay, I'll be calling on you to witness a few things. Eldest child 18 to 24. Okay. Eldest child 14 to 17. Oh, that brings them out, doesn't it? Anybody I haven't gotten to? Eldest child is 13, 12. Oh my goodness. We got a lot of newbies in the audience. Look, if you guys want to leave, I fully understand. Sometimes you don't want to hear about the car wrecks and so forth. Well, since you're here, I'll give you a good clue from the beginning. Beware of the parent karma thing. You see, when we're raising our kids when they're small, we think they're a lot of work and it's really tough. It ain't nothing like adolescence, just to let you know. So do not do the parent karma thing. What is that? Well, you're kind of bumping along with your first child, and she's 8, 9, 10, and you guys are best buddies. You go shopping together, you get the same outfits, those little sandwiches in Manhattan and all that kind of stuff, yeah. And you're so tight and close, and it's so wonderful. You're thinking, boy, this is so easy. And then you hear these noises outside, and the two of you look out the window, and there's your next-door neighbor with her 16-year-old daughter who's shrieking and cursing and hurling lawn ornaments at her mother. You're tempted to have a thought. I want you to not have it. What is the thought? I'd never let my daughter talk to me like that. No, don't go there. No, just say a prayer, light a candle, whatever you do. Do not judge, because it'll bite you somewhere you don't want to be bitten. Until you've walked in those moccasins, you really don't know. Take notes, watch what the veterans are doing, but don't get your expectations up too high. A couple of other points of business. Yes, this is the ugliest tie you've ever seen in your life. I had a couple people inquire about it. You're very polite up here in Basking Ridge. They say, that's an unusual tie, Anybody see the characters on there? There's anybody? Rocky and Bullwinkle, yeah, Moose and Squirrel, yeah, some people still know that. What's the story? Ross, my beloved son, doing great, by the way. Check my text. When he was 13, he went through the crash. You know the crash? Your kid thinks you're great, But Ross used to think I was like a little funny. He thought I was smart, thought I was a little athletic, all like that. And then one night, I must have had a massive stroke, and nobody told me. Lost it all. Anyway, so we were in the stroke phase when I was the dumbest thing and since sliced white bread. And at our Christmas gathering, big family, he presented this tie, a big humiliation thing. Like, I looked all over the city for a tie that would match my father's wardrobe and his taste. And everybody laughed at my expense, But don't feel bad for me. I got them back. Ever since, I wear it everywhere I go. I was on the Today Show, and the guy said, Dr. Bradley, the tie's giving the camera a problem. And I said, yeah, and my son Ross picked that out. Isn't that real? You can't beat him anymore. Sarcasm fills in well, I found. But and secondly, I'll beg your pardon for swigging on the water. The throat is a little sore from over-speaking. I am in better shape than I look, apparently, according to my daughter's comments. Sarah is our adopted daughter. Sarah, no joke, has PTSD. We were her fifth home in her first year of life. She was born, talking about this topic, she was born cocaine and opioid addicted. And she was unmanageable. They kept returning her from foster homes. So we adopted her, and my wife, being who she is, said, this one's staying because nobody else will take her. So anyway, we adopted her. She has a PTSD thing. From all that, you imagine 4 families disappearing on you in the first year of your life. So then comes 9/11, and I had flown out of Newark that day, and at our school, we did lose a couple of parents at the school she went to. And I was on the list that went out on the school somehow. And she heard the teachers talking about so-and-so, and Dr. Bradley died in the crash. Kids have the radar hearing, so she just fell completely apart. So she always gets weirded out before I leave on speaking trips, especially if I'm flying. So we had a tradition, I'd always snuggle her to sleep before I was leaving. And I was snuggling her to sleep a few years ago, and she turned to me and said, Daddy, are you going to die soon? And I was thinking stress and terrorism. And by the way, this works on the kids, the shootings and all that stuff that we love to blare in front of everybody 24/7. So I was thinking, oh, here we go, PTSD thing. And I said, Sarah, I do not think I'm going to die soon. I'll do everything I can to try to keep that from happening, okay? She said, okay, Daddy. And then I asked the question. I said, Sarah, can I ask you why you asked me that? And Sarah said, and I quote, well, Dad, because, just like, look at you. There's your next tip. Be very careful what you ask a teenager. They think you want the truth. So, assuming that Sarah's prophecies are incorrect, we'll get through the night. As you heard, one of my many former failed careers was as an Army officer. Actually, it was great. I learned a lot, but I felt that there was a breach of contract thing on the brochures. You ever notice how great the guys look? They're all tan and buff. Uniforms are spotless, and it turns out they make you go into really horrible places, and there's rain and muck, and there's people that shoot at you once in a while. Did you know that? I complained, and they just kind of laughed at me, but so I said, this isn't for me, and I left when my tour was done. However, since then, I've worked with vets because I like to dovetail the two things. I feel a lot of connection with the military. And I worked with vets who had gone through trauma in the various wars we've had. There were 2 vets. I want to share their story with you because it relates to your kids. The first one, they both had equally traumatic injuries. They each lost a leg, most of a leg, one right, one left. First call, you would predict. They said he won't get out of bed, won't see his family. He's promised to kill himself at the first opportunity. And, we got to do something. So the second call was about 14 months later, and they started off, the same guy says, Mike, we got this guy, he's an amputee. And I said, let me guess, he won't get out of bed. He said, no, get this, we can't keep him in bed. He's doubling the PT that has been set up for him. We think he's going to injure himself. He won't stop moving. He's on the floor all the time. He's counseling the other amputees. He's demanding to see all these people. And he wants a runner's prosthetic. Now, when you lose a leg, it's really hard to learn how to walk again. You start with a walker's prosthetic, and that's like amazingly difficult. Running is like Star Wars kind of thing. Some guys do that. And he said, no, I'm not doing the walk. I want the runner's prosthetic. I used to be a runner, so get the runner guy in here. So I was talking to him, and it was kind of as I was pulling a lot of this data together about resilience. And I said, can I ask you a question? How is it that you can be so like positive and upbeat? I was worried, are you covering all up, all that pain and so forth? And he said, man, I know what you're talking about. He said, I have the pain. He said, I wake up in the middle of the night, not to be too gross, and get sick because I've got killer pain from a leg that's not there anymore. It's a syndrome called phantom pain, a recent amputation. He said, yeah, I hurt, and I feel horrible. I lost a whole lot. He said, but I gave that frickin' war, my leg, I'm not giving it another inch of my life. So if you want to help me, you get the VA guy get in here because I want an exemption and I want the runner's prosthetic and I want to go to law school and yada, yada, yada. What was the difference between those two people? If you think about it, the same horrific injury, right? Incredible life-changing, and these were kids in essence. They were like 19, 20, 21 when I worked with them. They're essentially teenagers. And two radically different responses. The difference between those two people is something called resilience. And how do we define resilience? Well, a good metaphor is to think about two boats on a sea, and there's a huge storm, and a giant wave overwhelms both boats and they go down. And one boat keeps going down, and for some reason the other boat bobs back up to the surface. Resilience is not that the boat that survived missed the storm or missed the wave, but had some kind of a capacity to respond. It experienced the stress and the trauma and was able to bounce back and to reclaim itself. So that's the concept. And that's these two guys kind of burned in my head at the time where resilience research was pulling together. And so then we would do research on those guys. And we came up with a set of factors that tell us that certain assets that we can develop in kids are very protective against things like anxiety, depression, suicidal behavior, drug abuse, very protective factors. And that's what we're here to talk about tonight. Now, that may seem like a dramatic statement to make, but guys, I've been in the military, I've seen some things, and I've worked with teenagers for 3 decades, more than 3 decades now. And guys, I see your kids as in a war. I do. I see the stresses that they're subjected to, the things that they deal with, the changes in their culture. They got drafted, by the way. They didn't volunteer for this. It just sort of happened. And I can back up that radical statement by showing you the numbers that our kids are suffering in similar numbers to vets coming out of the military with depression, anxiety, drug abuse, and suicide. Very similar numbers. So I'm here to help you, to help your kid to be that second vet and talk about what goes into that magical potion that we need to start to address with our kids. Couple of things about resilience. First, again, you must remember that resilience does not occur with kids who are bubble wrapped. Keeping kids protected from all stress is a disaster. The idea is to let them experience certain amounts of stress and be able to develop the assets and the skills to respond to the stress. So what am I talking about there? The parents that lawyer up because the teacher is being unfair to the kid, or they won't let the cop discipline the kid. It was funny because I had a recent case, a little complicated, but the bottom line was I was saying, officer, this could really be helpful if you would go visit this family and just explain to them that, what the kid did was not right and they really need to own it because the kid needs to go before a judge. He needs to have these consequences psychologically. We'll talk about consequences and how that works. And the cop laughed at me. He said, Dr. Bradley, he said, where have you been? He said, maybe back in the day, people would listen. He said, today I'd be thrown off the porch because I'm daring to criticize their child. A lot of teachers quit criticizing your children. Ross would come home all angry about a teacher, and maybe the teacher was completely out of line. That might be true. But it had to be his problem to handle it. Because if we jump in and try to bubble wrap kids and solve their problems, we cripple them, as you're going to see. They have to experience pain and failure in the proper dose to become strong. The great news about resilience is that it is not a genetically inherited trait. People have confused this with something that's another aspect of psychology called grit that Pamela Duckworth talks about at University of Pennsylvania. Grit is a different concept. It does appear to be a genetic thing, and that's kind of a stick-to-it-ism. But resilience is different. Resilience we can teach. You can foster it in your kids. I tell parents, think of it as kind of martial arts, defensive martial arts, to handle the threats around them. And it's stuff that you start doing on the ride home from the delivery, from the hospital, and you continue throughout your time with your child. So I'm going to try to convince you of all this in 4 parts. First, we're going to talk about the brain inside your teenager's head. Yes, there is a brain there. Stop smirking. No, it's not the brain for which you had hoped. Teenage brains are very much a work in progress. Now, you guys have had some of this before, I assume, so I'll do it quickly. Yes, no, maybe so. Short course is teenagers are crazy. Why? Because Mother Nature is transforming their brain from a child brain to an adult brain, which is really cool. It's amazing when we study what goes on. Fascinating, the process, as long as it's not your own kid. If it's your kid, all hell breaks loose. And the reason is that she starts in the back of the head and works forward. What's in the back of the head? Things like impulses, passion, sex, crazy acting out behaviors, love of danger, love of risk, all that stuff is back there. And we all have that, right? In the front of the brain is what we call the committee. That's the prefrontal cortex, or the adult brain. So your adult brain grabs hold of these impulses and says, you know, that's a bad idea. Some guy cuts you off in the parking lot and he wants to fist fight you and you want to fight him. Well, your adult brain in a nanosecond says, yo, you want to die over 10 feet of asphalt? Like, let it go. So you have this committee up front. Kids have the first part in young adolescence, the impulses. They don't care about what the outcome is, and they don't have the committee to hold them back. So that's where we see these crazy behaviors from them that make people worry that the kid is bipolar. Once a month I get a case, family comes in and says the kid needs meds, he's bipolar, and I talk to him and I say, I got good news and bad news. Good news is he ain't bipolar. Bad news is he's a teenager. Good luck, thanks for coming by. You can pay on the way out. Those aspects of the teen brain also are anti-resilience factors. And they're anti-resilience because they often create an identity in the kid where they feel they're crazy. And they start to believe that's who they are. And they don't even think about alternative ways of being. And as parents, we often reinforce that image of them as being nuts and out of control as a permanent thing by using punishments versus consequences. I'm going to say that about 100 times through the presentation, and I will define that for you when we get to the end. But we have to remember that they are temporarily insane, and you have to treat them as if they have a temporary seizure disorder. Be very careful about your expectations and don't take their behavior personally. If they had epilepsy and they had a seizure, would you yell at them to stop doing that? What's wrong with you? No, you give them a safe space, you do whatever you can to protect them, and you ride it out. You wait till that passes. It's kind of the same with the adolescent brain. The second thing we're going to go into is the world around our kids, which is truly terrifying. Guys, this is not the world you remember. And if you are thinking you know what it's like for your kid because you were a teenager once, forget it. You're coming from a different cosmos. And I'll explain some of those things. I think you'll find that terrifying. Third, we'll get to the empowering part. What do you do about this stuff? And that's where we go over a set of strategies and tactics to build resilience in kids. And I think you'll find that kind of the good news part. When you see it, it's not all that hard. It's just kind of changing up the way you do this gig. Finally, we'll get to the best part of the evening, which is Q&A. Your questions, hopefully my answers. A couple of rules on Q&A. First of all, I am Irish by birth, not by choice. In my family, Q&A stands for quarrels and arguments. So if you want to challenge me and say, that's the dumbest thing I ever heard, and, where'd you get your degree from, and blah, 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 please bring it. It makes for a much better evening. Usually means I'm not being clear, or you know something I don't know. And that's why I still do these things at this ripe old age. Everywhere I go, I always get a gem. It's really weird. Somebody says something or gives me an idea or talks about another expert somewhere. And it really works. So please feel free to disagree. Second, contrary to the myth, there is such a thing as a dumb question. Do you all know what the dumb question is? It's the one you don't ask. That's really dumb in every sense of the word. I guarantee if you have a question, other folks have the same question, but not all of us are brave enough to raise our hand and talk into the microphone. And if we don't get to your question, and we probably won't because I talk too much all the time, but if we don't get to your question, get to me on the website. You can send me letters there, and I will answer you and try to get to the things you need through the website. So feel free to reach out there. Okay, so I mentioned that kids are crazy, right? And I told you why. They're going through this renovation, which creates neurologic chaos. Literally, certain functions are getting packed up and shipped to other parts of the brain, and all this wiring is going out and connecting. Did you ever renovate your kitchen or renovate your house? Was that a fun experience? Contractor said, we'll be out of here in 2 weeks. We did a house. From stem to stern, we did a house, and our contractor said, probably 10 weeks, 12 weeks. We just about finished, and that's 12 years that we've been at this. Because it just goes on and on. It gets frustrating. Remember the dust and the dirt and the switches don't work and all that stuff. Workmen showing up at 5:30 in the morning and all that. That's what goes on inside a teenager's head, and it's very unsettling to them, guys. Very unsettling. They used to be real sedate and simple creatures before they hit adolescence. And a lot of what you get in arrogant behavior from teenagers is defensive. They don't feel that they're sane. And they're so reactive to criticism because they can't explain what's going on in their heads. Again, it's the seizure sort of a metaphor. They actually feel terribly unsettled. And in response, they'll act cool. The girls try to set the hierarchy, the social thing, and the boys try to get all tough and bad and gangsterish and so forth. That's all defensiveness that you see in people that really are scared inside. They're fragile. So try to have a little empathy for their situation. When does this start? It typically starts 11, 12, 13. By the way, it seems to start earlier and earlier, and we're not quite sure why. Like girls are going through their first menses earlier and earlier, and we don't know why. They thought it was hormones in the milk, and that's been shot down. Believe it or not, the leading theory now is the culture that pounds them through the electronics with adult issues. Yeah, that's the converging theory that may fall apart at some point, but it's sort of telling them to be grown-ups at age 11 with sex and drugs and violence and all that stuff. And that may be a trigger or one of the triggers that's causing this. So it starts 11, 12, 13. Girls start down the path about 18 months ahead of the boys. By the way, does that ring a few bells, ladies? Do you remember being in middle school, co-ed class, looking around the classroom? What did you see? What were the girls doing? They were like taking notes, raising their hands. Remember? Yeah, being kind of cooperative. What were the boys doing in 6th grade and 7th grade? The same class. Yeah, spitting on the floor, throwing spitballs, pulling hair, right? Remember that? Remember looking around that room, ladies, and had that sinking feeling that, oh my God, one day I have to pick a mate out of this gene pool? How did those 6th grade boys look to you? Not so good. So what classroom did you start to hang out at? The 8th grade, the 9th grade. From forever, parents have screamed at their daughters, why do you have to chase the older boys? Why can't you find a boy your own age? You put the brain scans up, that 6th grade girl and 8th grade boy are very similar, much more so than the kids the same age. And it equalizes out later. But for those years, that's why you have that differential. So it doesn't mean it's a bad girl. It just means that she just can't believe the boys in her 6th grade class. It just make her sick. By the way, which would you say are harder to raise, girls or boys? Veteran parents, which are harder? Yeah, it's like 94% of respondents say girls are harder. I know the boys can be tough, but the girls always. I was part of that research. I interviewed this one dad that raised both. I asked him which are harder, and he said, well, let me think about it. When my son was 14, he was a bit of a maniac. He'd have these explosions, and he punched holes in the wall. He kicked the door off the gym one time. And a couple of years after that, our daughter turned 14, and boy, did we miss our son. They're very different in terms of how they handle this transition. Boys tend to, we say, go into the cave. They sort of disappear for a year. Typically, they dress in black. They'll come downstairs. They don't smell so good. They wolf down the food. They glare at you, and they go back to their room. Yeah, it's just what they do at that age. But the girls are a little different. They're kind of more interactive with their teenage angst. I've heard this one story so many times around the country. It's amazing. You'll probably finish it for me. That previously sedate, very cooperative, calm, logical daughter, suddenly you're in the family room and you hear her in the kitchen in front of your pantry. And in your pantry you got what, $6,000 worth of food? And she's banging things and slamming things and cursing. And you're like, oh my God, she's having a breakdown. And she's saying, there's... Oh, you've been there, huh? Yeah. And you're dumb enough to get involved in that conversation because you're a newbie. So you go in there, and you're saying, honey, what's wrong? There's nothing to eat. So, honey, there's lots of things. No, there's not. This is all food my creepy little brother likes. You never get anything I like. You don't care about me anymore. I hate this family. Calm down, sweetie. Let's take a look. Look, we got tuna fish. You love to. I'll make you a nice bowl of tuna fish. What do you say? I do not kill living creatures to sustain myself. Well, you killed a hell of a lot of them last week. I'm a militant vegan. Well, cool. That's great. I respect that. Let's see. Look at this. Vegan pasta. I'll make you a nice bowl of pasta. What do you say? Pasta. Pasta. I know what you want. You want me to eat pasta so I'll get fat and I won't have a boyfriend. I hate you. Ah! And 20 minutes later comes downstairs and says, Mom, did you see my soccer shoes? I can't find them. Yeah, woo, and you're still trying to heal the wounds of the previous explosion, and they're staring at you because they don't know. They forgot it. That was years ago that they had that outburst. Yeah, it gets like that. They're not bipolar. They're teenagers. That's just the way it goes. The key thing you need to know, and back to the darker side of the evening, is that their reward circuits go squampers. What are reward circuits? It's a set of wires in the brain that help us feel good. So how does it work? Well, like you may go outside tomorrow and it could be a beautiful, crisp morning and birds are chirping in the sunshine and you just stand there and say, God, this is beautiful. And you get a little thing of reward in the brain like, oh, I'm so glad I'm alive and see this and this is so cool. Well, their reward circuits are on steroids. So things that would give a certain amount of reward to an adult can give exponentially more reward to a child, to a teenager. What kind of things? Taking risks, driving at 110 miles an hour sort of thing. Drugs give amazing rewards to teen brains. Sex, ice cream, being up late at night, doing the drama on the texting screens and so forth. They give kids